the Evolution Security Podcast.
This episode of the Evolution Security Podcast is brought to you by Tenacor. Tenacor is an American design, development, manufacturing, and training company building products that work. They are innovators that come from a law enforcement and training background with years of experience. They produce industry-leading quintessential gear and build their clientele into capable protectors. Please visit Tenacor.com and support their business as they support this community. Also like them on Facebook and follow on Instagram at Tenacor USA, Tenicor, Tenacor. Now for the good stuff. We are giving away a free Tenacor holster this week. Stay tuned after the podcast to find out how easy it is for you to win. Welcome to the Evolution Security Podcast, where we give you the knowledge and live training to protect yourself, your family, and your country. Find a class schedule and upcoming events on our website, evosec.org. That's www.evosec.org. Follow us on Instagram at evosecusa. Find other episodes of our podcast on iTunes and Stitcher, where you can subscribe, review, and share with your friends.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for taking the time to join us in this evolution of expanded minds, healthier lives, and a branch of mathematics we like to call force multiplication. Now, since we have a really special guest that has directly influenced the EvoSec crew for about 2 decades, we're going to change the format up a bit. I'm going to give you an idea of Mike Brown's background and jump right into the interview. Mike Brown is a 22-year retired veteran of the Tulsa Police Department. He has been an accomplished athlete, becoming a Division I wrestler from Cornell University, a national champion in IDPA at the expert level, and has also made the top 5 in the masterclass division at IDPA Nationals. He is a multi-time world champion in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu in gi and no gi, and holds a black belt under Jean Jacq Machado. He currently teaches criminal justice in the Tulsa, Oklahoma area. Now, with all of these accomplishments, likely his best attribute is being an eminently qualified coach to help others reach their highest levels of their chosen endeavors.
Hey, Mike. Welcome to the show, brother. It's great to have you on the show, man. This is really going to be a great thing for us and our audience. Mike, you and I met at Gibson's Martial Arts back in the mid-'90s. For those of our audience that doesn't know much about you, go ahead and tell us where you're from and just a little bit about your personal life.
Sure. I grew up in Boston, Massachusetts, went to high school there. Went to college at Cornell University, and then after I graduated, I moved here to Oklahoma, got into the Tulsa Police Academy pretty quickly after that, and I worked at TPD for about 22 years in a variety of assignments. I was a firearms instructor, defensive tactics instructor, family violence detective. I was on the SWAT team there. And my last assignment before I retired from there in 2016 was I was the supervisor of the Crimes Against Children unit.
Well, what's interesting maybe for the audience is, as long as we've known each other, I remember the Mike Brown of the, brand spanking new police officer as a rookie, like I'd said earlier, showing up at Gibson's Martial Arts, a little bit of a background. Mike shows up to grappling class and essentially I'm like, hey, man, I think I asked you to roll. And, I had no clue what your background was, but I'm thinking I'm still doing okay in here. But I couldn't touch Mike. I mean, everything I did, it was, I was a soup sandwich. And finally, at the end, I said, "Hey, Mike, you got any experience with grappling?" And Mike says, "Yeah, I wrestled in Cornell." So at Cornell, I should say. It's like, yeah, that explains it.
Yeah, I mean, back then, that was at the time when grappling was not quite seen as a martial art at that point by most people, and people still looked at martial arts as, as karate, kung fu. I mean, I think by that time we were on the second UFC, I think when I moved here, and people were not quite familiar with grappling yet. And so anybody who had a wrestling background, had a massive advantage in any type of, combative grappling. And so that was, so as I remember my first time grappling at Gibson's and for a long time in that strain of martial arts, the grappling was like this kind of chain of submissions is what everybody knew. And when you eventually get into things like wrestling and Brazilian Jiu Jitsu and judo and other, very alive combat sports, you realize that's no way to train. You just can't learn to grapple that way. Absolutely.
I can't agree more. Thinking about how naive and how little I knew back then is kind of amazing, and I'm still just a blue belt myself. But anyway, Mike, I just wanted to throw out a little bit of gratitude so the audience knows, how you've influenced me. I mean, essentially, folks, ladies and gentlemen in the audience, Mike is bar none the most important influence on my martial path, both from shooting, interdisciplinary martial arts, integrating weapons, pushing me in the right direction in mental development. Just wanted to throw that gratitude out there, Mike. I really appreciate all your influence.
Well, I'm flattered that you say that. I don't know that I can really take credit for a lot of that stuff. I mean, it's just, I think that, one of the things I try to do is I with the vast majority of time when I'm teaching a particular discipline or getting involved myself, is I have a goal of finding the most direct formula towards succeeding in that area. And I'm just not terribly, part of it is just, I dive so deeply into them myself. And so I'm usually pretty good at finding what are some pretty direct paths to success.
Well, man, thanks a lot, Mike. It's been very much appreciated on this end, and I do sincerely mean what I stated. So I'm going to go ahead and give this over to Brian.
Hey, Mike, thanks for being with us. I got a question
thanks for having me.
On the law enforcement side. I mean, we know you're a veteran law enforcement officer, now retired. What initially made you choose to take that path in law enforcement?
Honestly, I can't think of a time when I wanted to do anything else. I knew from very, very young that I wanted to be in law enforcement. There was nothing that I felt like would have been satisfying to me other than, because I have a real aversion to bullying. And I very, very early on, I felt like, well, man, this is the way that you get to fight bullies every day. You get to fight the people who go out and victimize other people, the people who pick on people who are weaker than them, and you get to make them face up to people that can take that from them. And that's always kind of the motivation that I've had. And honestly, it's still what motivates me today. It's what motivates me in teaching, what motivates me, in life in general, motivates me in my career.
Well, Mike, speaking of teaching, that's your new path and your new career. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the classes that you teach?
Sure.
Kind of where that's going these days.
Right now, I teach criminal justice at Tulsa Technology Center in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It's a vocational tech center, that has all the regular programs that most tech centers have, like welding and computers and robotics and all these other stuff. And I have a program that is titled Criminal Justice, but really that's probably not as that name doesn't really explain what I do. What I do is I have students who are juniors and seniors in high school who aspire to be police officers. And what I do is I run them through a modified police academy. And a lot of times it gives them an idea of whether they really want to continue in this career or not. A real big problem we have today in law enforcement is that people get into it not realizing exactly what they're getting into. This idea that, you've got these crazy shifts and odd hours and you're working when everybody else is playing, and you don't work the same hours as your wife or girlfriend or husband or boyfriend or whomever. And they don't realize quite how demanding it is. And so what I try to do is I try to give them a good feel for that. Now, subsequently, what tends to happen is I get some kids who start to realize, this is not for me. And far better that they realize that as a junior and senior in high school than if they go to college, major in criminal justice, get on with the police department, and then decide it's not for them. Then it's just a waste of everybody's time and a waste of the taxpayers' money. On the other hand, I get some kids who look at it and kind of sign up on a lark, and then all of a sudden they found a career. They found what they're passionate about. They found that, man, this is something I can do. This is far better than than anything else I could have imagined. Because for me personally, I can't imagine ever having a regular job. It just doesn't resonate with me. I can't imagine doing anything other than working in this field, or something very closely related to it. And so what ends up happening is then where else I wind up with 70 converts a lot of times, and I wind up with kids who decide, man, this is for me. I love this, and I'm passionate about it, and it reinvigorates me in law enforcement too. It makes me excited about doing it again, seeing their level of excitement about it.
Well, Mike, as you told me that your career had changed to teaching, and I knew you were close to retiring, but when I heard that you were changing to teaching and teaching, basically in law enforcement field, I couldn't think of anybody else better to teach kids that's been in the field of both the pressure-tested martial arts, superb pistol shooter, can influence the kids to seek out the training they should be seeking out, even on their own, outside of the academy and outside of law enforcement. And I just couldn't think of a better transition for you in your career, for sure.
I've been pretty fortunate. I mean, it was it was not the job field I expected to be teaching in, but honestly, it was, something greater than me had a real good plan for me, and it was it's turned out great.
Excellent. Well, so Aaron, go ahead. You got a question for Mike?
Sure. Hey, Mike. So you've shot at top levels in IDPA, and you're a world champion in Jiu Jitsu. So what would you think would be the main key to your success in those endeavors?
I think that probably mindset is probably my biggest strength. My ability to focus on what's important and kind of discard what's not important. To find probably the most direct path to success. And I've been fortunate. I mean, I've had really, really good instructors. So each time I wanted to get good at something, I sought out people that I knew could, help me get there technically. However, I think that in almost every endeavor, no matter what it is, people who become good but don't ever manage to kind of crack that top level usually are very focused on technical development. And technical development is critically important. I mean, you can't, mindset, like Craig Douglas says, mindset is not a verb. You can't mindset your way into success. That said, technical development without a matching correct mindset does not lead to high-level competitive success. High-level competitive success usually the result of having an equally developed mindset to match a high level of technical development.
So, Mike, regarding that, I was a beneficiary of a lot of your mental development and the tools that you use for your successes. Do you want to describe a little bit about the Basham protocol?
Sure. Yeah. For those of you that aren't familiar with him, Basham was a Olympic rifle shooter. Won a silver medal in the Olympics in 1972 and a gold medal in the Olympics in 1976. And he is the person who was my greatest influence in terms of understanding the importance of mental development. Now, what I referred to before, the idea that you have to have a corresponding and matching mindset to go along with your technical development. That's purely out of Lanny Basham's instruction. Nothing that I'm saying here is something that I created. Again, one of my better skills is recognizing, what I need and then going out and acquiring it. And at some point in my development as a shooter, I realized that it wasn't that I couldn't shoot fast enough or accurately enough or move well enough or whatever technical the issue it was. The issue was that I did not see myself as good as I was. I didn't believe I was at the level I was. And the problem is that if you are technically at an extraordinarily high level, but your belief is that you are still, somewhere below that, you will not perform at your highest. A high level performance is created by having, a correspondingly effective self-image of where you exist in the performance spectrum. Now, at the same time, there are a whole lot of people whose self-image is way higher than their technical development. That's equally as damaging as having a high level of technical development and not having a sufficient self-image. But when those two match, the goal is to bring them both up at an equally high level. In other words, don't let your technical development get past your self-image, and don't let your self-image get past your technical development.
Well, Mike, I'll really comment on, the fact that you have used it basically in all of your successes, correct?
Correct. Yes. I'm really big on the idea of, like I said, of bringing my self-image along with my technical development. Now, it's gotten easier as time has gone on, just because, like anything else, the more you do it, the better you get at it. And so I've got a pretty good understanding now of how to do it. And I'm able to apply it to anything I want to be good at.
Well, essentially, back when I had some specific goals in my IDPA shooting, you set me aside one time taking a private lesson, and you said, Eric, you have the technical skills, subconscious and conscious skills. You just do not believe you are the goal that you're trying to achieve. And, you set me on the Basham protocol, and essentially it worked like, right. Clockwork. So the audience needs to go out there and do it. For me, it was like a light switch for me. For the audience that isn't familiar with what we're talking about,
what Lanny Basham encouraged me to do was to create a self-image statement, an affirmation of who I am and, what I want to accomplish. And what you have to do is say it in the first person in the present tense, as if you've already accomplished it. So, I think for you, your goal is to be a master level IDPA shooter. And if that's the case, then what you want to do is you want to, write the statement, essentially as if you have already accomplished the goal. And one of my favorite things that Lanny Basham told me was, you'll either keep writing this down or you'll quit. You'll either become the person in this affirmation or you'll stop writing it down. And it's true. I mean, that's only one of those two things can happen. And I found that for me, it was the transition into the master level of shooting. I was really, really good at the expert level. I won a national championship there. In the master, there's nowhere else to go. All the best guys are there. And I wanted to be there. And so my thought was, okay, well, I'm just going to shoot more. And that didn't get me there. And when I finally took the plunge and actually, I bought, to show how long ago it was, I was listening to it on cassette tapes. But when I listened to Lanny Basham's lessons and read his book, and then eventually I actually took some private lessons with him. Until I learned how to, essentially how to get past these obstacles. And once I'd learned to apply that, I went from being national champion at expert, shooting my first match at master and finishing last in the master class, to literally the next match I went, I won the master class, and then for years I never lost in this region in the master class. I mean, I won a ton of matches. I mean, not to toot my own horn, but just to kind of illustrate the power of of that statement. Is that I went from, like I said, from finishing last as a master to finish first all the time. To almost never losing. And so that was a pretty significant jump. At my very best, I think I finished fourth in the IDPA national championships at one point in the master class, and the guys ahead of me were Dave Savigny, Ernest Langdon. I forget who the third was, but it was another of those real famous shooters, and I beat some guys that were really good as well. Beat some name shooters, and that was where I kind of peaked. And one of my weaknesses is I tend to become bored with those sort of things very quickly. So once I achieve a goal, I'm pretty quick to find something else. And that was when I found competitive jiu-jitsu. And that's when I really started deciding that I wanted to dive deeply into jiu-jitsu.
Well, Mike, my just to add some levity to that, and I want to circle back to your successes in jiu-jitsu and get this passed on to Brian here as well. He's got a couple of questions for you. But, I'm nowhere near the level I used to be, at least in IDPA. But, when you put me on that path of using the affirmation statement, it definitively helped me make masterclass. And again, I'm trying to get to that level again. But you were my RO when we did that. That was kind of
I remember it.
I think it was.
Remember the day.
But anyway, go ahead and hit on your successes in jiu-jitsu using that method as well. Sure.
I'm a black belt in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu under Jean Jacq Machado and Christian Durr here in Oklahoma. And in terms of competition, my highest level wins were I won a Masters World Championship at the brown belt level in both gi and no gi. In 2013, I won the Masters Brown Belt World Championship in gi, and then 2015, I won I won a no-gi. So, I achieved some pretty good success in that arena as well, utilizing that same concept. The only difference was that it happened a lot faster for me than it did for shooting, just because I was already familiar with how to do it. Really, I knew how to build myself mentally. I just had to get the technical development as well. The technical development took me a little bit longer than it did in shooting. But in terms of getting myself, once I was there, I was there. I mean, I was on level. It took me about, I want to say about a year, maybe year and a half to get my blue belt. I was a blue belt for a long time. I competed a little bit at blue belt, and had some local success, but I didn't really start competing on the national level until I hit brown belt in 2013. And I got my I was a purple belt in 2012, 2013. I got my brown belt, went to the Masters World Championships, and before I was even a brown belt for a year, I had won a brown belt Masters World title.
Nice work, man.
So,
and that brings brings me to a question that I want to know, because being a lifelong competitor, both shooting and jiu-jitsu, are you planning on doing any serious competing again here in the future in either discipline?
Well, I unfortunately in the last few months, I've realized I've found that my doctor has told me I probably am going to have to stop competing in jiu-jitsu. I've got no cartilage left in my left knee, and the bones are rubbing together. And it's caused a real hindrance to me being able to do things as well. I can still train. I just got done training tonight. But the problem is that eventually I'm going to have to get a knee replacement. And when I say eventually, I'm talking probably sometime this year. And what they told me was that once you get back from that, it's a pretty significant and involved process. And they said if someone starts attacking that knee, it's really, you may have to do the process again. And that's not something you want to do. So he really discouraged me from trying to compete in jiu-jitsu again. He said I could still train. I just have to recognize that if someone, I have to let my training partners know that if they're attacking that knee, that, hey, that knee is extremely vulnerable. Just please, go slowly on anything that you're going to do. And so I just have to treat jiu-jitsu that way now on, and kind of focus on just enjoying the training and coaching and such. That said, what I did do, as I had not shot a pistol match in about, I want to say it's over a decade. I had not shot one, and I decided, well, this is something I can still do. And I do have I'm competitive by nature. I've got to have a competitive outlet. So I'm probably going to start shooting competition again.
That's awesome to hear, Mike, because I know you're going to come back into the field and start winning again. I think I saw you might have done extremely well. From what I understood, at least you were in the top, at least the top 5, weren't you? Am I wrong on that? Okay.
Yes. Yeah, I think I finished 3rd, if I'm not mistaken, 3rd or 4th, somewhere in there overall. But what was interesting about it was I really did just go up and shoot blind. I'm big on preparation for stages, and I really didn't do any of that. I mean, it really was just me going in there shooting cold. And to feel like I could go in there, shoot cold, and still finish at that level, it gave me some pretty substantial confidence that that with some preparation I could do much better. Now it was interesting. I don't know if I think I told Aaron this story. It was that what made me decide to go that particular day was I have a younger daughter who is now obsessed with shooting, and we were watching Top Shot on Prime Video. I was on Prime Video, and she said we should go shoot a match. And I said, I'll tell you what, there's going to be a match this weekend. You and I will go. So that's what happened.
That's so cool.
Awesome.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of daughters, got a question for you about Olivia. So, I mean, she's been killing it on the national scene. Was she not a national champion as a freshman, or was it a sophomore?
She was. She both. She was. She's a high-level wrestler. She won the USA Wrestling's folk style and freestyle titles in the 16U division, the cadet division, as both a freshman and a sophomore. And finished this year. She finished third in the nation in high school, the entire high school division. And Olivia's young for her grade, so she did extraordinarily well. She's for a second year wrestler to win 2 national championships is almost unheard of. So
that's bringing it for sure, Mike.
Yeah.
So essentially, do you think that there's a genetic component there as well?
If there is, it's not physical. I think that Olivia and I are very similar in our focus. We both. Olivia and I are very, very tight from the time that she was born. Olivia's never been to, like, I know a lot of parents these days are kind of forced by the nature of their jobs and such to do daycare. Olivia's never been to daycare in her life. I worked nights when I was a police officer specifically so I could be home with her all day. And so from the time that Olivia was born, Olivia's grown up in the gym. I would, take her and bring her in her car seat or, or stroller or carrier or whatever, and just prop her next to the mat. And I think that she's seen the value of hard work. She's had pretty good examples. She's seen the value of being focused on a goal and task, and kind of how to get that done. So I would say that while I think a lot of people ask me that, they say, is it something physical? I mean, I'm not a particularly gifted athlete. I think probably more athletic than average, but I think I've achieved more than my natural gifts simply because I have an understanding of how to compete. I have an understanding of how to find the best path to winning at a particular task. And I think that Olivia she has some understanding of that as well. She's just seen enough of it that she understands that there's a strategy, to success in her particular endeavor, and she dives straight into that strategy. And she's also a very hard worker. Olivia and I both share that. We both have a fairly strong work ethic. I think you and I have discussed that before, in terms of how, when I have a goal, I find, like, I go out and try to find what I believe is the best path or the best way to go about something. And then I dive headfirst into it, and I go pretty much all out to anything that I'm going to do. Now consequently, there's some downsides to that too. It's that, it's very difficult to, like, for instance, when I decided I wanted to be really good at jiu-jitsu, obviously my shooting suffered, because I just was not paying nearly the attention to it that I was jiu-jitsu. Now, one of my real obsessions is making my program at school just absolutely outstanding. And I dive head first into that. And as it turns out, this past year, I'm going into my third year of teaching. My program has competitions throughout the state. We have a physical competition, a PT competition, and then we also have a criminal justice competition where they do scenarios like traffic stops, domestic violence, they take they do interviewing, that sort of thing. And the first year, we did pretty well, but I was going in pretty blind to what the competitions looked like. So this past year, I had full knowledge of what it was. And so I knew exactly how to prepare for it. And so the very first thing we had was the state physical challenge competition. And my students, we won that state competition. And not only did we win, we scored more points than the second and third place teams combined. I mean, so it was a full on mollywhopping. These kids had worked, they worked extraordinarily hard. And once we figured out what we needed to do to get that, it was ours. It was going to happen. And then subsequently, we had the state criminal justice competition, which is an individual competition. There's no teams for that. But among the first three placers on the podium, there were about 94 contestants in this. And then each school gets to take 3 competitors per program. And since I've got 2 classes, we got to bring 6 kids. And my kids finished first and second and missed the fourth place student missed third place by a single point. So we came within a point of sweeping the criminal justice competition in addition to that. And then in the top 10 places of that competition, all 6 of my kids were in that top 10. So, I think that it's a testament to the idea that the process works. That trying to teach people the idea that technical competency and mental preparation must be pretty equal. And once you can do that, you can have really, really high level performance.
So you've helped a lot of people over the years, including us, with shooting and martial arts. Would you think that or say that coaching and helping others would be a calling?
Yeah, I think it's honestly, I'm a better coach than I am a competitor in general. I mean, I think that I can do well as a competitor, but I'm probably better as a coach just because I can, if I'm able to focus on the formula I have, and I can get either an athlete or a student who's better than I am, has more natural gifts, more natural aptitude in any of these areas than I do, I can usually point them, get them going in the right direction, mentor them to the level that they can usually achieve a pretty high level of success. And I think that it's something that I don't, like I said, I don't know what I would be doing otherwise. I mean, I just don't, when you say it's a calling, I think it's a calling because I just don't know how I could, I don't see myself doing anything else. It's coaching and teaching is just, it's what I enjoy. I enjoy seeing, people reach their highest levels of performance and recognize the importance of an extraordinary work ethic and, striving striving and failing and then finally reaching that, that ultimate level of success. I mean, it's a real thrill.
Well, Mike, you had introduced me to Craig Douglas of ShivWorks, many years ago, and that introduction has given me some of the best relationships I've had, in over a decade myself. Again, I think back to everything that I wanted to achieve is like I want to get better at this portion of my martial arts, and you would have a direction for me to go into. And the same thing happened with the interdisciplinary side and the pressure testing modality. What really led you to head that direction in your personal training?
Well, but before I get too far into that, let me first, because this is a really, really important piece to me, is that Craig is probably my single biggest influence in teaching, of anybody. And I've had some extraordinary teachers. I mean, I've had some really, really, good people show me how to teach, show me how to teach, guys like Cecil Birch, Craig, and I've had some really great influences, but I've really got to give Craig his props on that in terms of being the person who taught me how to teach. And I don't know that he intended for that to happen. I just observed him very, very closely, and we had a lot of conversations over the years. I mean, when Craig and I get on the phone, I don't know that we get off before 3 hours elapsed. So honestly, if I know that I'm going to talk to Craig, I know that I need to devote half a day, because it's just, it can go on for a while, because I appreciate Craig's pedagogy, in terms of how he delivers his material, and even more importantly, how he's adapted his material over the years. And, that's somebody who, like I said, I've got primarily what I had coming in with Craig was a work ethic. What I got from Craig was really learning how to take that and apply that to something, really, really useful. Now, to kind of get back to where you were talking about where it led us to, to go in that direction. It was interesting, because when you're a combat sports athlete, when you're in sort of thing, and you recognize, the nature of real fighting, you're not, when you're wrapped up in the hierarchy of martial arts, it's very difficult, you have to excuse my language, but it's very difficult to be bullshitted. And one of the things that I noticed throughout, trying to find good integrated training, is that the vast majority of people that that espouse that kind of material were just BSing people. They were saying things that were just purely theory. They didn't really have there was no pressure testing whatsoever of any of their material. And as a combat sports athlete, pressure testing is at the heart of what we do. Competition shooting is just pressure testing of those techniques. I mean, if they don't work there, you can't shoot more accurately, faster, in more control, then it's not real. Now, that doesn't mean that, you have to do it this way in order to be successful in shooting. But the reality is that pressure testing is what, determines whether things really work or not. And there was just no pressure testing of this kind of integrated combatives. Everybody was just, like I said, was just operating in theory. And one of the things that myself and another of my good friends and greatest training partners, Brandon Bennett, and I used to do was we were just looking at we were trying this stuff on our own, just thinking, well, man, what if this happens? And so we'd fight. We'd get on the mat and pressure test it out and come to certain conclusions, not others. And then it just so happened that we were looking around, on the internet, and internet was just getting big at this time, and we found Craig, and I just picked up the phone and called him, and just said, hey, tell me about this, and I developed a relationship with him, a development relationship with a guy named Paul Gomez, who was another, big influence on, feeling like I needed to pressure test everything that I was going to do. but all the things that for a long time, like I said, people learned in the police academy and a lot of these other places just weren't pressure tested. And over time, when you're involved in martial arts and things like that, there are some people that go one way, where they go much towards the side of hierarchy, where you spend enough time in a system and you get promoted, and next thing you know, you're the guy. You're a black belt, or you're an instructor or a guru or whatever title that particular martial art uses. And then you've got combat sports model, where your rank is kind of self-apparent. You either learn to be successful or you don't. Now, that doesn't mean that just because someone can come in and beat someone else up that they're a black belt. But it doesn't mean that. There still is there's still some technical understanding you have to have. But the combat sports model really kind of led me into the idea that we needed to pressure test everything we were doing in integrated combatives, whether it be firearms, blades, batons, any kind of weaponry, and most importantly, how they all fit together. And at that time, there wasn't anybody else doing that. We were out looking for it, and there were pockets of other people, I think, who had the same idea we had. Like another guy that I've been heavily influenced by over the years, a guy named Paul Sharp. Was a police officer in Illinois, BJJ black belt, combat sports athlete, outstanding shooter. Another guy just like that. Guys, trying to do the same things that we're doing. And he turned me on to a lot of important concepts as well. But the real commonality of all this is that we were all on this idea that, hey, we have to pressure test everything. And when you do, a lot of truths become self-evident. Now, Craig was the guy that kind of brought all this together. He was the guy who realized that, wait, these guys have some of this and they have an area that they can learn from. Like the first thing that I think that Craig recognized about me was that I had a pretty good insight into how to clinch. Just because of my wrestling background. And that was the kind of the thing I started doing the most for, and Craig recognized immediately that, wait, there's something to this. I got to pick this up too. So he started, he kind of traded what I would describe before what he was doing previously as this kind of trapping method that they use in like Filipino martial arts and such, and kind of traded it for, Greco-Roman wrestling. And just as time went on, I don't know if you've noticed kind of the development of, if you're a fan of mixed martial arts, but now if you look at mixed martial arts, pretty much everybody does the same thing. Now they're not exactly the same, but everybody has sort of a hybrid of a group of basic martial arts: wrestling, jiu-jitsu, boxing, and kickboxing. And then there are some guys who have a little bit of, other variations of other traditional martial arts like taekwondo or karate or other things, or judo maybe. But functionally, everybody is doing those four things. They're doing jiu-jitsu, wrestling, boxing, and kickboxing. So mixed martial arts now looks very similar, compared to where it was years before that. Well, now we're starting to see the same sort of thing in this integrated combatives, is that everybody's realizing that, wait, okay, we need a high level of firearms manipulation skill, i.e. competition shooting. We need a solid, robust, system for when bodies collide, clinching. We need a solid ground-based system for when bodies wind up on the ground, jiu-jitsu. And then we need to piece all those together in a format that works when we start plugging guns and other weapons into the equation. So now what you see now again, in this starts to look pretty similar all the way around, because now people who are being forced to pressure test things are coming to the same conclusions. That's why you just don't see some of the old BS that you used to see anymore, like things like the speed rock and other such things like that, or rock and locks, or all this other stuff that people used to talk about when they talked about close quarters shooting or integrated combatives, because those things fall apart under pressure testing. And when people start pressure testing their material, then all of a sudden you start to see that there are a limited number of things that work really well. And so it starts to, again, look pretty similar, much like, the development of mixed martial arts.
Hey, Mike, Aaron here. And now I just have to say I've got the fortunate station of actually living in the same metro area as you. So recently, of course, got to take a private pistol shooting lesson with you, which I'll tell you, it's just amazing. I mean, we've known each other for about 2 decades, and it's the first time we've gotten to do something like that. Now, I'll tell you, I said it the other day, but I mean, really, it was the best instruction in shooting that I've ever had. And I do know that it has to do with the personal coaching aspect, but I'm telling you, it's making me rethink how I spend my training dollars for sure.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because I've talked about this previously on another podcast. But one of the things I do now, in teaching, I teach obviously when I have a class, I have an extraordinarily large group. I've got about, anywhere between 18 and 35 kids at any given time in one individual class. So I have to be good at presenting to large groups of people. I have to learn how to do that. But within that instruction, I spend a great deal of time developing individual personal relationships with those kids. And that's really where the learning occurs. In terms of adult education and the formal training that I got as a teacher, one of the things I always heard was that, students don't really care what you know until they know that you have unconditional interest in them. If you're not able to display unconditional interest, they don't really care how much you know, or what you can present to them. And what that eventually got me to, to kind of be thinking towards is that rather than trying to do the standard model that the industry uses, which is like kind of the 2-day format, the 2-day large group format, I'm not as big a fan of that as a teacher as I used to be. That used to be the manner in which I did all my classes. It's a manner that almost everybody does. And it's a matter of necessity. I mean, just, it's difficult to do it any other way. But I get that opportunity already. I teach larger groups of kids every single day. So I get the opportunity to use that model. So outside of that, I prefer to use a very personal coaching model. I don't like to teach groups much larger than about 3 students, 3 to 4. That's about the largest that I like to go, because I really believe that you have to not only develop a personal relationship with your students, but the simple fact is you cannot, if an instructor is watching a line of 10 people, you just can't see what they're doing. And I think that a lot of times what that ends up resulting in is a lot of wasted time and wasted effort that could be better spent by individually coaching a single student, letting the other student kind of get ready and focus on what they're about to do, and then move on to the next student. So while that model is very, very difficult, in terms of time consumption and such, I think that it's a much more effective way of increasing performance. Because if you're not increasing performance, what exactly are you doing? If someone doesn't leave better than they arrived, they've just kind of given you their money. So if they're not, and that doesn't necessarily mean that somebody has to be you can measure and say they have to have shot better at the end of this than they have shot at the beginning of this. I mean, there's some other ways to measure performance, but by and large, if they didn't walk away with something to help them get better when they're not with you, then it just hasn't been time as spent as well as it possibly could be. And I think that individual model where people are able to ask questions right then, I'm able to stop right then and say, no, wait, let's unpack what we're doing right here. I think that model just works a lot better than the standard, the industry standard where we have, 15 to 20 people in a class and an instructor.
Sure. Now, I mean, again, it was a blast for me because, I mean, I was overwhelmed with how much I was learning. I mean, I've been in, I've had some classes from some high level, famous instructors, and I learned a lot from them. But the coaching, one-on-one nature, I mean, I was just blown away. Now, and speaking of, I believe we've got another appointment this weekend, don't we?
Yeah. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, I wanted to talk about a couple of things real quick here about some of the takeaways. I mean, of course, you helped me with some technical aspects, and I'm looking forward to diving into those more. But in this forum, I wanted to talk about a couple of things. Number one, you talked a little bit about, well, actually quite a bit about visualization. And you said something that really stood out, that, you can tell people all about visualization, and basically people that want to get better, it's the key thing that will help them get better, but few people will do that. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. When I talk about visualization, I think people get a different idea in their mind of what that really means. And so that I can be very clear on what we're talking about, I'll use shooting as the model, just because I imagine most of your audience has some familiarity of shooting, is that the way you want to utilize visualization in shooting is you want to do it in the first person. So probably the way I think most people will be able to see it is if you've seen these kind of first-person shooter video games, that's what it should look like to you when you're visualizing it. You should see what the gun looks like, what the gun is doing as you're doing it, and what you're seeing as you're trying to, accomplish whatever it is you're trying to accomplish, whether that be like running a stage in a competition or, shooting a particular string of fire or anything like that. You should see it in the first person. What I think a lot of people do when they think about visualization is they almost think like they're watching themselves in a movie, and that's not effective. If you want to make visualization effective, it's got to be what it looks like for you when you're shooting. Now, the issue is that most people, when they do that, they try it, and then they say, okay, well, I've done it, and now I'm ready to go. And the reality is that you have to get good at it like you have to get good at anything else. You have to practice visualization at a very simplistic level until you can start getting a little bit more complex with it. And most people just won't do it. They'll hear you say it, and it's crazy because visualization costs you nothing other than your time. People will spend, thousands of dollars on ammunition and guns and all this other stuff and not do the very simple thing that they can do to improve their performance, which is visualize it. And again, let me give credit to the person who really taught me about this, Lanny Basham, that one of the things he told me and that I am a full and emphatic believer in is that the subconscious mind, which is where your shooting occurs, does not understand the difference between fantasy and reality. And because of that, we can use that strength of the subconscious mind not knowing the difference between fantasy and reality, to essentially shoot a match in our head before we ever shoot it for real. And that means that essentially, like for instance, if you ran a stage, if you went out and ran a stage cold, and then you ran out and ran the stage again, and then you ran the stage a third time and a fourth time and a fifth time, odds are minus any, deviation based on, just train wrecks. Odds are your fifth run is probably better than your first run. Just because, you understand it, you get better at it. You've done it a few times. Well, in most shooting sports, you're not allowed to do that. You run the stage one time. So what you need is your subconscious mind to have run that stage about 10 times. And so what you do is if you visualize yourself running that stage, it's like rehearsing, like when you go and like when people go and do a play, they don't do it for the first time when they get on stage. They've rehearsed it tons of times before they actually get on stage and do it in front of an audience. And that's exactly what you're doing with that visualization. You're rehearsing that as many times as you can without an audience before you step up on that line and do it in front of the audience.
Yeah, well, it really stood out to me, and one of these days maybe we can get deeper into that when we have time. Now, one of the most profound things that really stood out to me in that lesson was when you started talking about negativity. Negativity from other shooters or negativity in general. But could you go into that, because it really stood out to me?
Yeah. Again, we're a product of the things that that we feed ourselves. Whether that be things on television, things on the internet, things in our personal lives, anything like that. And the odds are that if you have fed yourself something, whatever that may be, it increases the odds that that sort of thing will influence what you choose to do next. It's one of the reasons that things like commercials are so effective. Why companies spend so much money on commercials, because they influence what we do. I mean, honestly, in a kind of silly way, I am the guy who, when I watch a video and a guy tells me that this CZ or this Walther PPQ or this new Glock or whatever it is, every time I watch a video on one of those, I think, man, that's the next gun I'm going to buy. I'm that guy. I usually don't. I spend very little money actually on guns, but I always think to myself, I'm very heavily influenced by those type of things that I'm fed. Well, that can be used to feed yourself very, very good, positive information. And conversely, it can also be used to feed you very, very negative information. And the one of the simpler ways to understand it is that, I have a young daughter. And like every young child, she makes mistakes. She does things she shouldn't do, all kinds of things like that. And if I tell Ellie, I hand her a drink, in the kitchen and say, okay, now, I need to go put this on the table. What you hear most parents go and say is, hey, take this over here and don't spill it. Well, when you hear someone say, take this over here and don't spill it, what do you envision?
You envision spilling it.
Right. You hear the spilling it. Okay. So now what you've done is you have increased the odds that that child is going to dump that beverage all over the floor, because that's what's in their mind now. So, in that same example, the simple way to do that is to go over and say, I say, Ellie, okay, take this over to the table, use both hands.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't now what she has in her mind is, okay, I'm going to be careful how I hold this because I'm going to use both my hands. She's not telling herself, oh no, I'm going to spill it. Oh no, I'm going to spill it. And maybe she spills it, maybe she doesn't. But we've increased the odds. And that's not to say that just because I tell her to use both hands that she's not going to spill it.
Sure.
But I've increased the odds of a successful outcome by feeding her positive information. Now, how that relates to shooting is that, when we're on the line, if a guy goes up there and shoots a 15, 16 round string of fire, what's the first thing everybody asks?
Probably, what did you do wrong?
How many points you drop?
Oh, yeah.
So a guy could go up there and make 14, perfect hits. And then what's the first thing we talk about? The two bad ones.
Mm-hmm.
The two bad ones. Why do we do that? We got 14 great hits. Why do we talk about these two bad ones? And so so now what you've done is you've fed yourself this negative information by talking about these two bad things where you had 14 great shots that you made.
Mm-hmm.
Don't worry about those two bad ones. And so now in that same vein, when, the guy before you gets off the line and says, oh man, I blew that, I dropped 5 points, or I did this, or I did that. Man, I don't even want to hear that, because what that person is doing is increasing the likelihood that I'm going to do the same. Mm-hmm. When I hear people talk like that at a shooting match, I make an 180-degree turn and I go the other way, because I don't want to hear about it. Mm-hmm. I don't want to hear about people doing badly. I want to hear about how well you're doing. Mm-hmm. I want to hear about, man, I learned this, I did this, this was really good for me. That's the kind of thing I want to hear. I want to hear positives. I don't want to hear negatives. And now where the hang up for people is that it's kind of socially unacceptable to talk about how great you are. You know what I mean? I mean, nobody wants to be the, the cocky dude who's like, yeah, smoke that one. I'm pretty good. Nobody's going to be that guy. Nobody wants to do that. So really the answer is, when I see, some superior performance, I point it out. Mm-hmm. I look at it and say, man, look how well, so-and-so did. Man, that was fast. Man, look how accurate that was. Man, he got 15 out of 16. Mm-hmm. Because it's just as likely now, because now, as opposed to, the previous one, now, because it doesn't matter that it's somebody else. Mm-hmm. It's positive energy that's coming back to me. I'm increasing the odds that now I'm going to do well by talking about someone else's successes. Sure. It's just a matter of practice, of just kind of, feeding yourself good energy and getting rid of bad.
When we were working together the other day, I did something. We were shooting a string of fire, and I think it was one where we had to reload or something, and I goofed up on the reload, and I said, "Oh, I goofed that up." And you said, "Don't say that."
Yes.
Sometimes it's not as profound unless you're right there, but to me, what you said is, okay, you just made that shot. That shot landed wherever you placed it. And it literally doesn't matter where it went. If you miss the target completely, it does not matter one bit. It will not affect the next shot that you make unless you allow it to, by focusing on how you did wrong.
Yeah. If once that bullet leaves the muzzle, you can't do a darn thing about it. So don't worry about it.
Yeah. So don't even think about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Worry about the next one. The next one's the only one that matters. And don't think about the one that's 10 shots from now. Be all there in the moment. Worry about the next shot that you got to fire, and that's it. Mm-hmm. If you're stressing on the shot that's 10 shots from now, or the shot that was a shot ago, you're in the wrong place.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're, and most importantly, if you're beating yourself up over something that you've done wrong, immediately previously to that, you have increased the likelihood that the next one is going to go poorly too.
A really, really famous guitar player, one of the best in the world, and I'm kind of segueing here. Just an amazing guitar player. I was watching him on a video on the Clapton Crossroads. I won't mention his name just in case he ever hears this. But it's someone that I actually had the pleasure of opening up for here at Kane's Ballroom. But a few years later, I saw him playing this song that is his most famous song. And and again, we're talking about world-class musician here. He messed up, and then you could tell he really focused on that. And I'm telling you, he played about 10 mistakes after that. And I could not believe it. It was literally a train wreck. But I mean, it was the exact same principle as what we were talking about. I dropped that reload. Don't say that. Well, so now we'd like to kind of lighten the load here on, the heavier martial arts and fighting and such. Just curious, Mike, what is it that you enjoy outside of martial arts, shooting, and all this stuff that we like to talk about on the show?
Well, honestly, the biggest thing I do outside of outside of these things that I that I'm passionate about is man, I'm just a huge fan of my daughters. Awesome. I go to just about everything that they do. And that's what honestly absorbs most of my time. I mean, I drove, 13 hours to Fargo, North Dakota to sit and watch. I don't know that I have ever missed a wrestling match that my daughter's been involved in.
Awesome.
So I am her biggest fan. So that's probably the biggest thing that I do outside of all the stuff I do.
That's awesome. Yeah, being a father is pretty amazing.
It's pretty. It's outstanding.
Well, one other question, because we're getting here close to the end of the show here. Now, of course, I'm a musician, and music's pretty important to me. And just curious now, what would you say would be your 5 favorite either musicians, bands, or favorite music to listen to when you work out, or just whatever?
Man,
and no judgment here.
Yeah,
no judgment here.
No, not at all. Yeah, favorite artist of all time, without a doubt, far and away number one is Prince.
Holy cow, dude!
He's the one that I look at and say immediately, I think that's got to be the greatest musician of all time. That's a guy who plays he plays like 21 instruments. He has been making new music and reinventing himself from the 1980s until his death. That was a guy who, in my opinion, probably like I said, I think the greatest musician of all time. Just did so many things and never produced bad music. It wasn't anything that he did that was bad. And I'll tell you this, and this is the other thing about Prince that nobody ever gives him credit for, is Prince never got hooked up in any kind of bad scandal. That's
true. Interesting.
If you think about how many, you can't say that about a whole lot of musicians. Yeah. Just the nature of of fame in the music world is that it is so often accompanied by scandal. And Prince, if you think about it, when was the last time Prince got involved in something crazy? You can't think of one, because I don't think it ever happened. That's being a professional.
It's hard to argue with Prince being one of the best musicians, or the best musician that's ever lived. That's excellent. Now, so who else?
So my next groups, my favorite growing up as a kid, in my era kind of time, was definitely the Beastie Boys.
Oh yeah,
man, another group that knew every lyric to every song back then. And so the Beastie Boys probably next. After that, my taste kind of changed a little bit. Next favorite is probably Stevie Wonder. Another guy that that you look at and you say, did anything ever go wrong with Stevie Wonder? Probably not. So Stevie Wonder, and then after that, Smokey Robinson, and then after that, Marvin Gaye.
Oh, awesome, man. Well, I said no judgment, right? But you've got no problems with judgment on those artists. I can tell you that's an excellent lineup.
Yeah, no, I can't on some of those other ones. I can't say the same thing I said about Prince, about not getting involved, because all those other guys got involved in all kinds of crazy stuff. Well, I think that's, like I said, I think that's the nature of that industry. I think they're just, but that's those are the ones that I think that have always been my favorites. And it's, for me, it's a tie to my youth.
Oh, sure.
All those groups are groups that I listen to because my mom listened to, or my grandparents listened to, or and so when I think about like all the, because honestly today, I don't keep up with music the way I do with a lot of other things. So I'll hear something today that I like, that resonates, but nothing resonates with me like the music of my youth.
Sure. Well, I think that's true for everybody. I can tell you I don't listen to any new music myself, honestly. I'm actually back in a stage of playing, shred rock guitar from when I was, 19 years old. So it's another story. When you, just real quick, when you bring up Prince, there are a handful of albums like Kind of Blue by Miles Davis, or U2's The Joshua Tree. And then you've got Prince, Purple Rain. Man, literally some of the best music that it's so perfect you can't do anything to it or it'll ruin it. Right. So yeah, excellent choices. That's a fun topic for me, but I'll tell you what, thanks for your time, Mike, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to Eric.
All right.
Well, Mike, thank you very, very much for joining our audience tonight. It is most certainly, I think the audience really needs to take heed to a lot of the wisdom that you've been laying down tonight. Take notes, audience, and, research some of the topics that Mike has hit on. And I promise you that you will benefit from his recommendations and again, back to his wisdom. So, Mike, it was an extreme pleasure to have you on the show. I can't wait to do this again.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. It's been a lot of fun. These are the topics I love talking about. And, honestly, there's nothing I like more than seeing other people succeed. And, I like my own successes. I like, I've obviously that's been an occupying force in my life, is, trying to succeed on various levels. But honestly, man, I really get a kick out of watching other people improve and, seeing their, the happiness that they get from their own success, whether those successes be minor, or those successes are, extraordinary achievements. I remember I have a student that just graduated this past year, and and she brings a tear to my eye, whenever I think about her, because I remember the day that everything changed for her. She's a student who was on what's called an individual education plan at her home high school. Which is for kids with functionally with learning disabilities, kids that do not normally perform well in academic environments. And she told me one day that she had aspirations to be a canine officer. And one of the big things that we do in this program that I teach is we work out. And she was never a fan of that. So one day we're getting ready to work out, and I walked up to her and I said, "Hey, do you know what job on the police department requires a higher level of physical fitness than any other. She's like, no, what? I said, being a canine officer. And literally a light switch flipped. And this young lady all of a sudden gave everything she had into being in shape. Never had before. Never had before. And by the end of the year, what I had was on my hands then was a physical stud. And she was hired immediately by an agency right out of school, performed extremely well in that area. And about a month ago, I get this text on our class group, and she sends me a little private message that said, if you ever had a greatest teacher, tell them. And this little note, and she sends that to me, and that's the good stuff. That's the stuff that makes this, the most gratifying thing you do. I mean, like I said, I just love seeing people succeed. And if I can provide any inspiration to them to succeed, man, it's just so worth it.
Well, Mike, that's an incredible story, incredible success story. And that's why a lot of us have seeked you out as a coach and a mentor, man. That's really excellent. So thank you so much. And we'll go ahead and close it out. I can't wait to do this again sometime. Mike, you have a great evening. God bless, brother.
Thank you, guys. You as well. And we'll see you on the next one.
I'm just going to go ahead and kick it off here with accountability, and what we normally do is share with each other what we've done for the week. And I had an off week, actually. Did not get into the gym as many times as I intended. I had some commitments that kept me away from there, and then did not get as many jiu-jitsu classes in as I intended. So I only got to jiu-jitsu once last week. I did get into the gym 3 times. I did get some live fire, and I did get an actual workout and live fire that I'm going to let Eric share about in a minute here. But we're also talking about what we did for our drill, and it was the full speed casino drill. And I am proud to say that I shot that thing in 19.8 seconds, but I'm sad to say that I lost a round. So I did not get that thing perfect, man. And it was frustrating because it was my first round out of the holster. And during this week, I also spent time drawing and firing initial round from the holster because of that. And I didn't go through the whole drill again. I'm sure I could nail it if I tried, but what I really enjoy about doing this and sharing about it is that I identified a problem. I am slow to target on that first shot out of the holster. And I'm either not as accurate as I want to be, or I'm not as fast as I want to be. And that is somewhere I've got room to improve. So that's the biggest takeaway that I've got for this week. And I did get only one dry fire session in, but it is better than 0. So how about you, Aaron?
Well, on that drill, again, this is accountability, right, guys? So I have to say, starting out, this is one of my favorite drills. This is one that I learned first from going to an actual Tom Gibbons class, and I was just elated at how you could have a shooting drill and have to really think through it and get flabbergasted when you didn't count the rounds right. But just have to say, I did shoot it clean. I always went for shooting it clean. And now at this full speed, I was supposed to make the par time of 21 seconds. I shot it clean, but I did not make the 21-second par time. I believe, actually, I know that my time was 21 seconds, 0.93. So I need to work on that myself. Trying to shoot it clean, you kind of slow down a little bit. So now on to my accountability for the things that I've done this week to better my life, I'm changing mine up a little bit and going to talk about some different things that I usually do each week. So instead of martial arts, I've done my usual routine for a martial arts and shooting this week, but I'd like to talk about the fact that I took several online lessons from my favorite guitar player, Paul Gilbert. As you guys know, music is a big part of my life, and I have a lot of fun doing that. And I make sure that with those, I keep an approximate time of practice for about 2 hours a day. Just a side note, music is really, really good for your brain. They've done studies that show that when you're playing music, all centers of the brain light up, which is pretty neat, and therefore, of course, it's pretty good for mental development and mental agility. Now, another thing I do for my mind is I'm an accountant, and often I have to do presentations in front of people and get up on the whiteboard and analyze things, and so to keep myself on top of doing math in front of people, I do math flashcards every day. I know that's kind of taking us back to the 5th and 6th grade, but hey, whatever helps me keep on top of that. And we've got some pretty big training coming up next month. So again, I'm trying to lose. I'm probably about 12 pounds over where I want to be. And so I have been intermittent fasting. I've done it 3 times this week, and I am planning on doing it every day, basically eating as early as I can in the evening and then eating my lunch as late as possible. And lastly, I would like to talk about, of course, when you're trying to keep yourself healthy, you don't always get the right nutrients. So I'm just going to lay out the supplements that I usually take. I take a lot of stuff from Thorne Research in my research and finding good supplements. I found that company, and so I take a normal 2-a-day vitamin from them. Take that, of course, twice a day, and then I take something from them called ARN cap, which is glucosamine, MSM, curcumin, and boswellia. And all that is, of course, is for joint support and also anti-inflammatory. And of course, if you listen to Jocko, he's going to talk you into taking krill oil. So, of course, I take krill oil every day. But again, that's my accountability. I wanted to change it up a little bit this week, guys. So, Eric, you have your info?
Yes, I'm going to be changing it a little bit as well, not beating a dead horse all the time, because we do basically the same type of routines each week. But this week, changed it up a little bit. The big item, we had Jason Kelly here in town, and what a phenomenal 4.5 days that I spent with him, and also Brian spent a day with him as well. Definitively, iron sharpens iron, and the wrestling drills that we did, the physical drills that we did, is definitively what we talk about in developing mindset. Jason's a hardcore dude. I learned so much from him in the clinch realm, in Greco realm, and it's going to change my game big time in that area. Brian, I just wanted to ask you what your thoughts were on Jason, and I can swing back to the rest of my accountability.
What an upstanding dude, man. That guy walks the walk. He really, really showed us things that I just would never have thought that we would learn in the time frame that we had with him. And again, you got to spend a lot more time than I did with him, but what a dynamic dude just to be around. I mean, there's just a presence around him that you understand that he knows what he's doing, and he wants to help you be better. And when you do something wrong and he shows you, here's how to do it right, man, he is an excellent teacher, and I would encourage anyone that has the opportunity to take any training with him to do it. But we did some drills and exercises that, I've got just a little bit of jiu-jitsu experience, and that's really my entire grappling world. But he showed us some ways of how to take a hold of somebody and put them into a control position and not keep yourself in a safe position and keep yourself in a position where you can then maybe potentially introduce a weapon, etc. And it really, really cool stuff, man. And I'm just going to keep saying really cool if I keep talking.
Well, and to the audience out there, we are going to have a full-fledged AAR, or after action review, as we called it in the military. So that's going to come up real soon. We'll have Jason on the show for that. But it most certainly was an incredible experience. And like you said, Brian, Jason walks the walk. Every single event that we went to Bangor Navy Base, and also did some work on JBLM, Fort Lewis, Washington. And every single event, Jason got in there and went on go rounds, as he calls it, getting gangster with everybody. Just every single person in that room got to feel, two things: never getting an underhook on him, and his awesome, incredible control. So we're going to have a really cool show there. So moving on to the rest of my accountability, I went to jiu-jitsu once that week, or this last week as well. So Jason Kelly seminars and events kind of dictated that. As far as the drill of the week, Aaron, we're twins, right?
Yes, we are.
So I think you still edged me because you shot it clean. I also had one shot out like Brian, but I shot it in 21.49 seconds. So a drill I used to be able to shoot decently. I need some work on that, but I'm saying it like it is. So basically, that's about it for the week. Real quick, I did finish education-wise American Heritage, one of Hillsdale College's online courses. I learned a lot, and that was a fun course.
I will get on board with Aaron. The Thorne products, without a doubt, some of the best vitamins I've ever taken. Best vitamins, best supplements, and they're not paying me anything. As a matter of fact, I pay dearly for those supplements, and you may have to look for them at compounding pharmacies or places because a lot of these things, like the multivitamin that I take, that I think it's called the ALS something, but you can't buy it online. You actually have to buy it from a practitioner or someone that is actually a pharmacy. It's sold over the counter, but great products. I think there's some licensing issues with that. But aside from all that, we are going to talk about the new drill. So this week we're going to move on to a new drill because we've finished out that casino, and this is the B8 Bull that we're moving on to. So we're going to really, really work on that focused accuracy. This last drill was a little bit of accuracy and speed and movement. This is all about putting bullets in the middle of the X, and that's all we're going to focus on for this month. So B8 Bull, common target, used in a lot of NRA shooting, a lot of training, a lot of different drills use that. It's available online. You can print them yourself on 8.5 by 11 paper, full size. So this is something we wanted to give you, something that was easy. You can buy them and they hold up a little better, but if you just want to print them, you can print them. And this week what we're going to do is we're looking for a minimum count of 50, and scoring the target is simple. The X is 10. There's a 10 ring, a 9 ring, and an 8 ring, and you want to score a minimum of 50. This is 10 yards with 10 shots. So that's it. Back it up to 10 yards. Put your 10 rounds downrange through the target. Take your time. There's no clock on this. So really want to focus on good sight picture, positive, consistent pressure on the pistol, strong grip with your weak hand, and breaking that trigger in a pressing motion, not a jerking motion. So this is where you take that dry fire practice and actually put it into real life. You do that same trigger stroke. You breathe. You release the trigger the same on every round, and that's what we're looking to do. So that's the drill for this week. B8 bull, 10 rounds, 10 yards.
Good deal, Brian. I know I'm looking forward to running that new drill this week when I hit the range. Now, like we said on the last show, we're giving away one more Tenacor holster of your choice. Now, all you need to do is go to our Facebook page, Evolution Security, or on Instagram at EvoSec USA. On both of those platforms, there will be a post about the contest. In that post, tag a friend and share the show with them, and make sure you're subscribed to the show as well. Then your name will be in the drawing. Enter as many times as you like with new friends and new shares of the show. Remember, we're on iTunes, Stitcher, and all the popular formats. Now, we hope you enjoy the show and help us get the word out. Until the next show, be safe and evolve.